perks in Outer Worlds 2 are a complete game changer, and there are some of them that I highly recommend checking out for almost any build you create, especially if you're planning to go on the hard and the very hard difficulties. Today we're going to talk about damage, survivability, and some cool combos, so let's jump right in. Also, quick disclaimer here, you're not going to pick every single one of these. Depending how you create your build, you will want to prioritize some of them, but for the most part, for what they do, these perks are actually really strong. So beginning with the guns category, this is like one of the best, and pretty much any build that uses guns should probably get at least 5 points in it. And even by level 5 in this, you get some very strong options. Point blank artist or sharpshooter are something that you get access right away from level 1, with the change that sharpshooter also needs 1 level into observation to activate, but this depends mostly on the type of weapons that you play with. If you're going with SMGs, shotguns, and pistols, point blank artist is going to work best, obviously, especially if you're going with plasma pistols or the death whisper shotgun. This is going to benefit that so much. But sharpshooter works just as great if you're going with a sniper build. 100% sneak attack damage to all of these, plus the extra damage to far or close enemies, depending which one you pick. For extra critical chance, Crabble Rancher and Serendipitous Slayer is what you're going to pick from this point on. Require like guns level 2, and both of them will affect different categories of weapons, like I said. So for example, for a shotgun build, you would obviously get the Crabble Rancher, which affects it the most, and 20% critical chance on that is really crazy, plus the 10% to extra range damage. Now, another very strong combo that you should probably use for any weapon build, and this is something you can get with just guns level 5, is the combination between Deep Drums, Hail of Lead, plus the overprepared perk, and you can even add an extra helmet with more magazine size on top. So the way this works is that you're going to get the bonuses from the deep drums, which already gives you a 50% magazine size, and also auto reloads some of your weapons over time. This includes assault rifles as well, without having to do anything. And then you combine it with the other 50% that you get with the overprepared perk. You can even exceed 100% if you also add an extra helmet on top. And this is going to make you almost always avoid the flawed drawback, the 40% damage debuff that you would get if you were to reach low magazine size. This almost never happens with this combination unless something goes horribly wrong, which is where Hail of Lead really kicks in and helps. This is going to really benefit any high rate of fire, high ammo count build out there, because it's going to give you a damage stacking buff per shot, and it caps at 100% damage, so you're going to get so much extra damage as you continuously shoot at the target. Especially if you're going with a minigun build, there is one that's really strong. Also with some of the early assault rifle or burst rifle options you get, some of the green options from early on can actually be really strong even in the late game, and this is just going to benefit those builds so much. Which also brings us to point number 3, and another very popular and very inexpensive way of improving your damage drastically is via some of these elemental perks right here, including Hot-Blooded, Caustic Researcher, and Electrotherapist. So for just one singular point in their respective skills, so either grenades, medicine, or science, you can get access to one of these 3 versions right here. So for example, if you were to invest 1 point into grenade, you can immediately unlock the Hot-Blooded perk, and this is going to let you stack more burn stacks when dealing plasma damage, 20% more of those, which means being able to fully stack that up on a target. And as you may or may not know, the plasma effect is basically an AoE damage explosion. So that's going to help you a ton with AoE DPS or just having an extra source of damage. And every single time you build it up on a target and max it out, you're going to cause a damage explosion. So the more HP the enemy has, the more damage explosions you will see. But it goes the same if you go with 1 point into medicine. There is a version of this for caustic / corrosive damage to apply vulnerability even quicker. So especially useful versus enemies with a lot of armor. Or if you're fighting a lot of mechs and you want to go with like a shock build, Electrotherapist from just 1 point into science literally does that, but of course for electric damage. I've also got to say that Hot-Blooded provides an amazing combination with the Lucky Strikes, even though you need to invest way deeper into guns, pretty much maxing out 20 out of 20. This is such a strong extra AoE to have on top of the one provided by Hot-Blooded. So specifically, critical hits with this will cause another damage explosion, and it even increases your critical damage by another 100%. Plus, it spreads a whole bunch of that damage to nearby targets as well. And what I've noticed is that on very hard difficulty, it makes taking down targets so much easier because you're typically going to reach high critical hit chance anyway with a build following some of these perks right here, so you're going to trigger these explosions very often. And many times I've noticed that targets get pretty much one-shotted because I was able to trigger a critical hit on them, especially if you're aiming for like headshots and whatnot. This seems to work so well. So if you're going with a full guns build, I highly recommend Lucky Strikes. Now, we kept talking about stacking as much damage as possible. However, if you're playing on the highest difficulties, you will soon notice that you really need a lot more survivability. And in my opinion, Science is one of the best skills for that, specifically because of a couple of perks you can pretty much get by Science level 3. And this includes Rapid Recharge as well as Contingency Screen. So specifically in the case of the Rapid Recharge, for which you need only 1 point into Science, so if you can spare that, absolutely get it. So if you drop to just 10% or less gadget energy, it gives you a 500% boost to energy recharge for 5 seconds. Obviously, the cooldown is 30 seconds, but this is actually going to trigger so often. You're going to be able to spam your shields a lot more often, or some of the other abilities as well. If you want to go with the slow time instead, this is going to benefit a lot. Even if you don't go with any helmet that further provides more energy recharge rate, and 500% is some of the highest, which is why you may also want to combine this with Contingency Screen. You will need Science level 3 and to have unlocked the gas energy shield for this, but this is going to automatically pop up the shield if you drop below 25% HP, even if you don't have enough energy activate the shield. So this is pretty much like almost a cheat death mechanic. It kinda avoids you getting the death blow. It immediately just charges the shield up for a portion of the bar, and it's going to get you out of so many tough situations. In fact, if you combine this with the Shrug It Off, these have consistently been my best options to stay alive for a lot longer, especially during fights. But we're gonna talk about Shrug It Off in just a little bit. In the meantime, I want to talk about a skill category that a lot of players tend to overlook, but may as well just be one of the strongest in the game, and that's actually going to go to the speech. And there are a couple of reasons why that is the case. So speech is going to help you a ton in many situations. You're going to notice that many of the fights or many of the secrets in the game, even progression in certain like missions and whatnot, depend on your speech level, where having enough speech can tremendously change the outcome or even the progression of that specific encounter. However, it also features a very strong perk called Space Ranger, and by default this requires only a level 1 into speech to unlock. However, to take full advantage of it, you will likely need to go way deeper in it. So if you get like level 20 in speech, that's going to be a plus 50% damage to all of your sources of damage. And because you get a lot of sources of damage, that doesn't just mean that you're going to get a 50% to weapon DPS, for example. You may even end up doubling it because you're essentially giving that bonus to every single component that goes into that weapon's DPS or damage. So this is something that's going to help you both in terms of resolving things peacefully, but also getting insane amounts of damage if you do end up in conflict. To the point that I've actually used this on builds where I never planned to even use speech to get myself out of tough situations. I just got it for the 50% damage increase to all of the sources, which is why it makes it one of the best in the game at specifically doing just that. Now, of course, we do have some other honorable mentions over here that are really strong. I do have to give my shout out, of course, to the lockpicking, because one single level into that gives access to pickpocketing, and this is like one of the strongest in the game. It's essentially an ability that you literally cannot get otherwise. And there are so many keys pieces of information or things that can become a lot easier to acquire because you can just sneak behind the target, crouch down, and grab it from their inventory without being noticed by anybody. There's literally no downside to it. Another one is for engineering. So engineering has a couple of them that I really like, including Tinkerer and also the Master Armorer. So Tinkerer essentially is really useful if you go with anything that fully mods weapons. And because you're going to always want to mod weapons anyway, you're going to always get that 10% damage buff anyway for that weapon. But it's going to further increase even more if you invest more points into engineering. So if you're going with a deep engineering build, this is going to benefit you a lot. You're not going to lose out DPS just because you're going with a tree that's normally focusing on modding and gear and whatnot. Which is why Master Armor is also getting a quick mention here. Even though this is going to be a level 20 engineering unlock, it is going to help a ton to provide another mod slot for your armor. And if you're playing on the hardest difficulty, this may actually help a ton to, basically just survive a lot longer. You're going to need mods a lot in the hardest difficulty, and this is going to facilitate that. So if you're going with something like engineering as speech, you can already probably notice that you're getting a massive bonus damage just from these two. And of course, we also have to talk about the ones that do not require any skill investment. This includes the Bullet Shield, the Trophy Hunter, and also the Shrug It Off, but Shrug It Off unlocks after you invested at least 11 perk points into the available perks here. But specifically, the first one just gives you more damage resistance and extra HP, which is really good. It may even counter some of the drawbacks from the flaws you get, like some of the sickly flaws over there can be countered somewhat here. Trophy Hunter is just pure critical chance, so there's absolutely no reason to not get this. It's just going to help you a ton, and if you're going with any build, like for example ones with lucky shots and whatnot, or if you're going with a stealth build, this is going to just benefit that so much. And of course, Shrug It Off, I just enjoy the way that works. It gives you a 50% to your HP, basically an overshield at the start of every combat. But here's the thing, it's not just going to work at the start of the combat, it's going to work at the start of any group combat. So say you just defeated a group of enemies and you still have some overshield left provided by Shrug It Off, you're then going to exit combat immediately, and then you engage with another group. That's actually going to be considered another combat start. So you're going to get another overshield on top of the one that you may already have left. And there were occasions when I was running with like double HP bar because I still had all of the previous overshields stacking as I was going from group to group. Especially since the AI is so mediocre in this game that you can disengage easily and like just stack this off. You're going to have an easy time to get this off. So really helps a ton with survivability on the very hard. I also want to give a special mention to the melee tree. Now in this case, it's going to require a deeper investment, but recently I've been playing with a melee build on the very hard difficulty and I was in shock how good it can get. It's just that you're going to need a lot more perk investments here to make the most out of it, to actually get some really crazy DPS going, because pretty much everything here you're going to need to invest into to basically get the most out of your melee damage. So just to show you some of the stuff you can do, you're going to get all of these passives in the melee that help with your attacks so much. So some of my favorites are heavy-handed. This is pretty much going to be a stun. Whenever you perform a heavy attack on a target or a power attack, it's going to knock them down. And if you're playing with something like the Thunderstruck from very early on, that's literally going to be on every hit, because you really want to always perform heavy hits on the target so that you stack all the damage and the stun at the same time. I also really love the Run and Hitter. It's another 50% damage with a two-handed melee, in this case weapon, if you're doing it after sprinting, which you're pretty much always going to do, so you always benefit from it. Echoing Blows is equally as nice. Another 50% of the damage is going to be spread to enemies in front of you in a large cone. It kind of makes you feel like you're Thor unleashing shockwaves of extra damage. I really enjoyed Tit for Tat as well for the extra 25% healing. Literally every time you deal damage, you get 25% of your health back for melee weapons. So that is something that's going to keep you alive so much. Lucky Strikes also works really great here. There's a version for the melee 20 as well, so you get extra critical damage, which is also going to spread that damage via AoE explosions to other targets nearby, so you can end up with some really crazy shenanigans. If you do want to see a build around this, let me know in the comments. I've been running with it and it seems that nothing stops me, but you do have to invest a little bit in it before it fully starts to shine. And yeah, that pretty much concludes today's video with some of the best perk combos that I personally recommend. Of course, you're not going to always combine every single one of these, and you will have to make concessions, but depending at what point you are in the game or what you're focusing on, you may want to prioritize getting some of these for your current build. In the meantime, of course, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.